What happened to Rent a Girlfriend? The anime was really popular a few years ago and people loved to hate the manga, but nobody talks about it anymore. They announced a new season recently, but nobody freaked out like they usually do. Part of it is because the series is so hated on, but part of it is also the fact that the manga has dragged on for way too long. So if you're someone that watched the anime or you've seen people trash on the manga, you're probably wondering what happened to this series and whether it's actually worth reading. That's why, now that I've read all 380 chapters, I'd like to talk about some of these common criticisms, discuss why Rent a Girlfriend completely deserves its cringy reputation, but also explain why that cringe makes it one of the most entertaining stories you will ever read. Just be warned that there will probably be some spoilers. Now, let's start by talking about why people think this manga is so cringe. Because whenever you see people talking about Rent a Girlfriend, it's usually because something impossibly weird just happened in the manga, and that is obviously due to the premise. As you can imagine, Rent a Girlfriend is a story where the main character, Kazuya, visits a website that rents out girlfriends. And not in a gross way. Actually, it's kind of worse. When Kazuya goes on the app, he can pick a date from a list of pretend girlfriends. So he contacts one of the rental girlfriends named Chizuru before the two meet up at a coffee shop. There, she politely asks Kazuya for a cash payment before the two of them go on what is admittedly a really cute date. But Kazuya doesn't have fun because he's a freshman in college that just got dumped by his girlfriend and is still a virgin. And when he looks at Chizuru and thinks about what she's really doing, he can't help but feel insecure. This leads Kazuya to publicly insult Chizuru during their date, to which Chizuru snaps back and explains that she's just doing her job. The two eventually make up and agree to go their own ways, but then they find out that they go to the same college, or excuse me, university. To make matters worse, they soon realize that they live right next to each other in the same apartment building. So as fate would have it, Kazuya is stuck with this girl he paid to go on a pretend date with. As the story progresses, the two have to pretend like they don't know each other in front of their friends. Then they get tied into making up an elaborate story to their grandmothers, who are both in the hospital and think they make the perfect couple. At this point, they have to pretend to be a couple for their grandmothers, and this gets them in an even bigger mess. Eventually, they get discovered by Kazuya's ex-girlfriend, Mami, who won't leave him alone. They also get caught by another rental girlfriend, Ruka, who falls in love with Kazuya and blackmails him into being her boyfriend while he's still pretending to be Chizuru's boyfriend. Obviously, this story lacks the innocence of rom-coms like Komi-san or Sign of Affection, and this alone makes people hate the show, which makes perfect sense. People already think of anime fans as these body pillow carrying incels that prefer their girlfriends in 2D. So having a show about renting pretend girlfriends doesn't exactly help that problem. But that's exactly what makes this series so fun. I mean, sure, I love a good wholesome rom-com, but I also love my trash stories like Below Deck and The Summer House. And that's exactly the kind of story you're getting with Rent a Girlfriend. True, there are weebs out there that praise the character growth, which I will talk about later because I have some thoughts, but 99 out of 100 people don't take this show seriously. It's just like reality TV. If you accept that the characters and their behavior are trash and just sign up for the chaos, it's so much fun. But even then, people still have a problem. Because for a lot of people, they don't care about the premise. It's anime, so they're used to weird shows. What keeps them away from Rent a Girlfriend is Kazuya and his cringy behavior. And while I agree that Kazuya is a terrible main character, that's exactly why I love reading the manga. But real quick, before I explain why that is, make sure to join the channel if you're enjoying the video. You get custom badges and emojis to show off during our weekly live streams, and you can pick which series I cover next. Now, the creator of Rent a Girlfriend, Reiji Miyajima, claims he started the series because he thought it would be interesting to write a story about rental girlfriends. And yes, interesting is definitely the right word, but in his execution of that idea, he designed Kazuya as the exact kind of individual that would actually rent a girlfriend for a pretend date. A terminally inexperienced and emotionally insecure virgin. Kazuya is without a doubt the trashiest character in this series. which is a problem for a lot of potential fans, because even if the idea of Rent-A-Girlfriend sounds interesting, it is impossible to overlook Kazuya's behavior. First of all, he is completely afraid of women and places them on a pedestal. So much so that when his ex openly trash talks him at a mixer, he actually agrees with her. On top of that, he relies on browsing the internet at a level that goes way beyond that of a healthy adult male. And this leads him to sexualize women in completely absurd ways. And on top of that, he is completely spineless. Like when Ruka blackmails him, he knows that he, as a 20-something-year-old freshman, has no business dating a 17-year-old in high school. But because he's spineless and because he doesn't want people to find out about him and Chizuru, he agrees to be her boyfriend. And it's this kind of stuff that makes it easy to hate Kazuya. And it's because he's such a disgusting character that so many people find it hard to give this series a chance. But that's exactly why he is the perfect main character for Rent-A-Girlfriend. In most rom-coms, the guy might be nerdy, but he's a good protagonist because he steps up to the plate when he needs to and is actually a perfect gentleman. None of this is true about Kazuya, but you couldn't have a trash story without this kind of trashy character to make everything worse. He's the whole reason we have Mami-chan, who would easily be the main character in her own show on Bravo, and it's his cowardice that leads to the messed up rivalry between Chizuru and Ruka. So many of the problems in this story could be stopped if Kazuya would just man up, but it's great because he doesn't. It's like when you're out to dinner and two of your friends suddenly start fighting. Sure, you could step in and stop them and everyone could cry and say how much they love each other. Or you could have a bit of fun and watch things play out. It's because of Kazuya's terrible qualities that you can read such a shocking story like Rent-A-Girlfriend. Plus, he does have a few redeeming qualities. He may have unrealistic expectations for women, but that's partly because his grandmother is such a strong role model. She started her own liquor store that has always supported the family, so Kazuya has always looked up to her. He also happens to be really good with kids, which is totally random but shows that he's not completely terrible. And on top of all that, he goes out of his way for Chizuru whenever she needs help. One time when she almost drowns, Kazuya actually jumps off of a boat to save her. He's also nice enough to go out with another rental girlfriend, Sumi, and gives her genuine praise when she's clearly feeling insecure. Plus, he makes a promise to Chizuru's grandmother that he'll protect her. So Kazuya is gross, but he's not completely terrible. So while it is difficult to watch him, he occasionally does something to make you kind of pity him. And it's these kinds of moments that lead some fans of the manga to argue that Kazuya actually matures throughout the story and becomes a better person, which would be somewhat justifiable if it weren't for this panel right here. Even if you don't read Rent-A-Girlfriend, you've probably seen this panel floating around, and it's never for a good reason. And this brings us to the question of what happened to Rent-A-Girlfriend. Like I said, the anime used to be really popular, and that got a bunch of people into the manga. And when this panel of Kazuya made its way to Twitter, everyone chimed in to trash on this series. So really, we have two questions. What is so bad about this panel? But more importantly, why hasn't anyone talked about the manga since then? So let's start with the first question. I won't get into too many details because of spoilers. Also because it's gross. But basically, here's what happens. So after Kazuya crowdfunds a movie for Chizuru to star in because he's madly in love with her, he finally decides he's gonna work up the courage to admit his feelings and ask her out on a real date. Before he can, his grandmother invites everyone, including Chizuru, out on a vacation to a hotel resort. At one point, when everyone is in the pool, Kazuya reaches a point where he feels like he has no chance with Chizuru anymore. This causes him to imagine what it would be like for Chizuru to be with another man. As a result, he finds himself both depressed and turned on at the same time. Mind you, he's doing this underwater with everyone else in the pool. As you could imagine, this is the final straw with a lot of people. And honestly, I completely agree. As much as I love this series for the entertainment, and as much as I think Kazuya is a necessary evil for that entertainment, I also hate everything about him. And it's more than just the fact that he's gross. People might claim that Kazuya grows throughout the story, but that's just not true. The pool scene I just mentioned happens almost 300 chapters into the manga. Mind you, the manga is almost 400 chapters, so he really hasn't gotten any better. Plus, like I mentioned, you get 300 chapters into the story, and he's still behaving like this. Which is kind of funny in a sad way at first, but after 30 volumes, it's nauseating. Like at one point, Kazuya actually shares a house with Chizuru, and every time the two of them bump into each other or they're just in the same room, Kazuya explodes into this whole parade of emotions. Like, it's one thing that he's gross, but he also just has no self-respect. Like, the guy is happy just to look at a girl that he's known for 2 years. So on the one hand, he does have his redeeming moments, but they only make you pity him. Really, Kazuya doesn't grow at all, and that lack of growth just makes him worse because he doesn't change along with the other characters. He's like the poster child for stories that happen to the main character, instead of the main character driving the story, and in the worst way possible. So a big reason people don't really like the story is because Kazuya never gets any better. The story progresses, well, actually, no it doesn't, but I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, the story progresses, sort of, but he doesn't. And you might argue, well, people still read the manga for the girlfriends and they're decent characters, but honestly, they're just as bad. As much as I praise Mami-chan as the Aizen of rom-coms, she's just sad. Not because she has this tragic backstory. It's just sad that she's so obsessed with ruining Kazuya and Chizuru's lives, and she doesn't even like Kazuya. And even Chizuru is kind of trash. Like, she's supposed to be this all-around great person, but she's no better than Kazuya. She has just as many opportunities as Kazuya to end their fake relationship, but never does. She also pushes Kazuya into the relationship with Ruka, which sucks. And while Ruka is kind of innocent in the beginning because she just wants to meet a nice guy, she only makes things worse when she forces herself into Kazuya's family and kind of just makes his life worse. So even though Rent-a-Girlfriend was really popular early on, that popularity just hasn't been enough to convince people to follow the manga. Well, I should say casual fans don't want to read it because the manga is actually really popular. So popular that it got its own spin-off with Sumi, who is really the only good person in this story besides Chizuru's grandmother and Kazuya's neighbor Yaemori. But my point is that, as fun as it is to read this trash story, a lot of the story's value comes in the first 100 chapters. After that point, the characters just get worse and the story recycles a lot of the same tropes. I will say I really like the arc where the pool scene happens, but like usual, that's only because of the shock value. If you want to read this manga and hope that it gets better, that's not true. Rent-a-Girlfriend is pretty much the exact same story now that it was 400 chapters ago, which explains why nobody really hypes up this manga even though so many people read it. And the simple answer is because it's just not a good romance. In the beginning, you have a lot of romantic tension. Kazuya likes Chizuru and they're pretending to date. Mami bullies Kazuya, but there's always a chance that she might actually like him. Ruka is constantly pressuring Kazuya. Even Sumi provides some romantic tension. But a lot of that tension falls flat when the story keeps hitting the same beats over and over, and nothing ever goes anywhere. And to illustrate why this is such a problem, let's compare Rent-a-Girlfriend to another rom-com, Nagatoro. Both series got really popular when they got their own anime, and they both got popular for being weird. Rent-a-Girlfriend for renting girlfriends, and Nagatoro for Nagatoro teasing senpai while really being madly in love with him. Now, if you're a Rent-a-Girlfriend fan, you probably don't go out of your way to advertise that you read the manga. Well, I do because I think it's awesome, but I also talk about anime for a living. Healthy people, not so much. Meanwhile, I've seen tons of people watch the Nagatoro anime who then go on to tell everyone how much they like the manga, and that is because there's genuine character growth in that manga. Senpai is a spineless nerd, but he pushes himself to grow as an individual and to express himself around Nagatoro. And this inspires Nagatoro to be more honest about her feelings and her own dreams, like competing in judo tournaments. That's one of the biggest problems in Rent-a-Girlfriend. Chizuru does all of the growing, but she's actually still trash. And Kazuya is so invested in Chizuru that he has nothing motivating him other than Chizuru. He does one cool thing by crowdfunding the movie, but like, he doesn't have a job, he's studying business but is banking on inheriting his family's liquor store. There is literally no reason to like Kazuya beyond those few rare moments where he helps Chizuru. But even then, he holds her on such a pedestal that a lot of the time, it just works against him. Instead of finding things to do for himself, he's always thinking about Chizuru. And Chizuru has this thing where she has trouble being honest about her feelings and hides behind this perfect persona, but this just makes her lead on Kazuya. And this leads to one of the worst things killing the story. She says she doesn't not like Kazuya, but she says she needs time to decide if she really wants to date him, which is reasonable and honestly pretty mature. Except she said that like a year ago. It's been like 100 chapters. They've been on this big date for like 20 chapters, which is still going on, by the way, and she's still thinking about it. So not only is there no romance, but because Kazuya doesn't have any self-respect, and because Chizuru is so indecisive, there's been no progress in the plot for over 100 chapters, which means that while the story is pretty fun in the beginning, it takes way too long for even the smallest sign of growth. So you're pretty much wasting your time if you invest in this story, hoping that Kazuya and Chizuru are gonna get together. They dance around it so much just to keep the story going without any genuine growth. It's for that reason that I completely understand why people hate this series or say they would never read it. That being said, I can't stop reading it. I recognize that this story is both trashy and a trash story, that it relies on shock value and doesn't tell a real story with good characters. But you know what? I don't care. As much as I can tell you everything wrong about this manga, I just can't stop thinking about it. And it's really because of how dumb these characters are. I love watching Kazuya get absolute layups when it comes to the right thing to do, and still fumbling. I love watching Chizuru torture this perpetual virgin, even though she thinks she's a good person. I love watching Mami-chan pretend to be nice, when she's really coming up with a way to start World War III, and still somehow make herself the victim. I love it because it's entertaining. It's entertaining because these characters are so impossibly dumb and immature that it's completely detached from reality. And it's that detachment from reality that makes Rent-a-Girlfriend the perfect reality TV show. It's kind of like how Quentin Tarantino compared Yellowstone to a really good movie.
The story is good. It's not just about the interpersonal relationships. The story is good itself, but there's a payoff to it. But there's not a payoff on this stuff.
Yellowstone is a good show, but it's not something that you'll remember in like 10 or 20 years. It's entertaining, but it's not really art, which is exactly how I feel about Rent-a-Girlfriend. Sign of Affection is a work of art. Komi-san is a work of art. Nagatoro, though somewhat reliant on tropes, is a work of art, literally. Rent-a-Girlfriend isn't a work of art. Its characters never grow, and it never has anything to say. It's just a story that pulls you in as the characters get dumber and dumber, and any chance of it being a good romance is killed by the way it drags out the plot. But I love that this is basically the one piece of romance, because as much as I should hate this series, I want to read every single chapter, and watch the anime, and read the spin-off. And that is because it's just that entertaining. So, while it might not be a work of art, Rent-a-Girlfriend is definitely an addicting story that everyone should read at least once. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Rent-a-Girlfriend isn't that fun. How would you rate this series? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And don't forget to become a channel member. You'll get exclusive badges and emojis, you can pick which series I cover next, and you can get credited in future videos. Also check out my other manga videos, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.